Hello everyone, I am here to help you today. I know you use this video to fall asleep. Now get comfortable and relax. The evening was quiet, and the small lakeside town of Rosewood was bathed in a soft, silver glow from the rising moon. The air carried with it a cool crispness of autumn, and the scent of pine trees swayed gently with the breeze. Street lamps flickered to life, stretching pools of golden light along cobblestone paths that wound between flower shops, cafes, and the old library. It was the kind of night where silence wasn't empty, but filled with whispers of something waiting to unfold. Amelia Hart had always loved evenings like these. To her, the night sky felt like a canvas painted for dreamers. The moonlight, tender and forgiving, seemed to soften the weight of the day and remind her that beauty was not only in the grand, but also in the still. She tucked a stray curl of chestnut hair behind her ear as she leaned against the wooden railing near the lake, her journal resting in her hands. The pages were half filled with thoughts, sketches, and fragments of stories she never seemed to finish. For weeks now, Amelia had been restless. Her life as a teacher at Rosewood Academy was stable, predictable, even comforting in its rhythm. But lately she had felt a tugging in her chest, a longing for something she couldn't yet name. She watched the reflection of the moon ripple across the lake and sighed softly. Across town, in a small studio apartment above a bakery, Ethan Cole was unpacking boxes. His return to Rosewood felt surreal, almost like stepping back into a painting he had once left unfinished. After years in the city chasing a career in photography, he had found himself drawn back to the town where he had grown up. The city lights had been dazzling, but they never offered the same peace he had once known under Rosewood skies. Ethan pulled out his camera, its worn leather strap brushing against his arm. He hadn't planned it, but tonight felt like the right time to wander out and capture the night. With his camera in hand, he descended the narrow stairs, offering a polite nod to Mrs. Clay, the elderly bakery owner who was closing up for the evening. She smiled warmly, her eyes glinting with recognition. "Back for good this time, Ethan?" she asked gently. He gave a small chuckle. "I think so, Mrs. Clay. The city was different, but I missed this place, missed the quiet." "Well," she said with a knowing smile, "Rosewood has a way of giving people what they didn't know they were searching for." The words lingered with him as he stepped into the night. Not far away, Amelia traced her fingers along the edge of her journal. Her mind drifted to a story she had started weeks ago about two strangers who met under a sky filled with stars. She never finished it, partly because she wasn't sure how the strangers should meet, and partly because deep down she wondered if such stories only belonged in fiction. She heard footsteps approaching and instinctively glanced up. A man was walking slowly along the lakeside path, camera in hand, pausing every few steps to adjust his lens. The silver light illuminated his features, Tall, dark hair, slightly tousled, sharp eyes softened by curiosity as he gazed at the world through his lens. There was something in the way he carried himself, as though he had seen enough of life to know when to move quickly and when to simply stop and breathe. Ethan noticed her too, a young woman standing by the railing with a journal pressed close to her chest. The scene looked almost too poetic to be real, and for a moment he hesitated, unsure if capturing the moment with his camera would intrude. Instead, he lowered the lens and simply let his eyes take in the stillness of her presence. Their gazes met briefly, and Amelia felt her heart stir unexpectedly. She wasn't sure why. It was just a glance, a fleeting connection under the moonlit sky. But it carried with it a quiet electricity, like the beginning of a song. Ethan offered a small nod, almost shy, and she found herself returning it. Neither spoke, and yet the silence wasn't awkward. The lake shimmered between them, and the world seemed to shrink to just the two of them and the whisper of the wind. Amelia finally broke the stillness. "It's a beautiful night to be out here." Her voice was soft, almost as though she wasn't sure if he would answer. Ethan gave a gentle smile. "It really is. Nights like these make me remember why I came back." "You're from here?" she asked, curiosity flickering in her eyes. He nodded. "Born and raised. Left for a while, but Rosewood has a way of calling you back." Amelia tilted her head, intrigued. "I've lived here my whole life, and sometimes I wonder what it's like out there." "Loud," Ethan replied with a faint chuckle. "Crowded, bright, exhausting, but also full of moments. Still, it doesn't feel like this. Out there, you forget to look up at the moon. Here, it feels impossible not to." His words sank into her heart, aligning with thoughts she had scribbled in her journal only days ago. Something about him felt familiar, though she was certain she had never seen him before. Perhaps it was the way his voice carried a kind of honesty that was rare. The conversation slipped easily between them after that, as though the moon had opened a quiet doorway. They spoke about the town, about the places they both loved, the cafe by the square, the bookshop with its crooked shelves, the annual Lantern Festival. Amelia told him about her students, how their laughter made her days brighter. Ethan spoke of photography, of chasing sunsets and finding beauty in the unnoticed corners of life. As the night deepened, their words grew slower, softer, carried by the rhythm of the lake's ripples. There was no rush, no demand for more than what was being shared. Just two souls, quietly aligning under the moonlit sky. And for the first time in a long while, Amelia felt that her unfinished stories might not need to stay unfinished after all. The clock tower in Rosewood Square struck 9, its deep chime echoing softly across the town. The sound rolled over the lake like a lullaby, reminding Amelia that time was quietly moving, though she wished the moment could linger just a little longer. She shifted her journal in her arms, not ready to leave, not ready to end this unexpected encounter. Ethan noticed the way she glanced back at the clock tower, her expression caught between duty and desire. He recognized it. He had worn the same look countless times in the city, torn between responsibilities and the rare chance to pause. Something inside him urged him to speak before the night dissolved into memory. "Would you mind?" he began, his voice tentative but warm. "If I took a photo? Not of you directly, but of the scene. The moon, the lake, the light where you're standing. It feels worth remembering." Amelia hesitated, then smiled softly. "Only if you promise it's not just the moon and the lake you're remembering." His lips curved into a faint grin, surprised by her gentle boldness. "Fair enough. I'll remember both." He lifted the camera, adjusting the lens carefully. Amelia stood still, her figure outlined against the shimmering reflection of the moon. He pressed the shutter, capturing not only the image but also the quiet hum of connection that lingered between them. When the click faded, Amelia exhaled. "So, do you always carry your camera around?" "Almost always," Ethan admitted. "It's like a second set of eyes. Sometimes I see things better through it than I do on my own." "And what did you see tonight?" she asked, her voice playful but curious. Ethan lowered the camera, meeting her gaze. "Someone who looks like she belongs under the moonlight." Amelia's breath caught for a second, and she looked away, the heat of a blush coloring her cheeks. Compliments weren't foreign to her, but there was something about the way he said it, unrushed, sincere, that made it feel different, like he had noticed something deeper than appearances. The night grew cooler, and a gentle breeze rippled across the water. Amelia wrapped her cardigan tighter around her shoulders. Ethan noticed and instinctively stepped closer, though he didn't reach for her. The closeness alone seemed to ward off the chill. "You know," Amelia said softly, "I used to come here when I was younger and I'd pretend the lake could hear secrets. Like if I whispered something into the wind, the water would hold it safe." "That's beautiful," Ethan replied. "Did it ever answer?" She laughed quietly, shaking her head. "Not in words, but sometimes in feelings. Peace, or hope, or just a reminder that I wasn't as small as I thought." Ethan tilted his head, thoughtful. "Maybe that's why I came here tonight without knowing why. Maybe the lake still keeps secrets and reminders for those who need them." For a moment, neither spoke. The silence wasn't heavy, though. It felt like a pause in a song, where the music lingers before beginning again. Amelia looked at him, her heart unexpectedly steady despite the strangeness of it all. She wasn't used to letting strangers in, but Ethan didn't feel like one anymore. Finally, she asked, "So why did you come back to Rosewood?" "Really?" He exhaled slowly, the question striking a chord. "Because somewhere along the way, I forgot what it felt like to breathe. The city gave me everything I thought I wanted. Success, exhibitions, recognition. But every night, surrounded by buildings and noise, I'd look up for stars I couldn't see. I guess I realized that I didn't want to just chase beauty. I wanted to live where it already existed. Amelia's eyes softened. She understood more than she expected to. And do you think you'll find it here again? His gaze lingered on her, unwavering. I already am. Her heart gave a quiet flutter, one she tried to hide behind another gentle smile. But the truth was clear. His words had slipped past her guard and nestled into a place she rarely let anyone reach. The lamps along the path began to dim, signaling that the town was slowly winding down. Amelia reluctantly straightened, realizing she couldn't stay all night no matter how much she wanted to. I should probably head home. I have a classroom full of 8-year-olds waiting for me tomorrow morning. Ethan smiled knowingly. That sounds like an adventure on its own. You'd be surprised. She laughed. Sometimes I think they teach me more than I teach them. I don't doubt it, he said softly. Children notice the world in ways adults forget. As they walked toward the square together, their steps naturally falling in rhythm, Amelia wondered if she should say more or let the night end simply. She wanted to know if this was just a fleeting moment or the start of something that would ripple through her life like the moonlight across the lake. At the corner where their paths would separate, Ethan paused. Would it be too much if I asked to see you again? Maybe for coffee at the cafe by the square? Her heart skipped, but her answer came easily. It wouldn't be too much at all. He smiled, relief and hope mingling in his expression. Tomorrow, then? Tomorrow, she agreed, her voice soft but certain. They lingered for a beat longer, neither wanting to be the first to turn away. Finally, Amelia gave a small wave, and Ethan watched as she walked toward her apartment. Her journal still held close as though it carried the magic of the evening. When she disappeared around the corner, Ethan turned back toward the lake. He raised his camera once more, capturing the reflection of the moon. But this time, when he looked at the photograph, he didn't just see the lake. He saw the beginning of something he hadn't even realized he was waiting for. And under the moonlit sky, Rosewood seemed to whisper quietly, almost knowingly, as though it had been waiting for this story to begin. The night deepened, stretching its quiet arms across Rosewood. Stars glittered above like scattered lanterns, each one carrying a story, a wish, or a secret. Amelia walked slowly back to her small apartment above the flower shop, her steps light but her mind full. She clutched her journal tightly, not because she feared losing it, but because it now held the weight of the evening. Inside, she lit a single candle on her desk, its glow flickering against the walls lined with books and sketches. She set her journal down, opening to a blank page. For a long time, she simply stared at it, the pen resting between her fingers. The words in her heart felt fragile, like glass that might shatter if pressed too hard. But slowly, steadily, she began to write. Tonight, under the moonlit sky, I met someone who reminded me that silence can be filled with meaning. His name is Ethan. I don't know why it feels important to write it down, but it does. Maybe because something in me already knows this will matter. Maybe because tonight felt like the beginning of a story I never dared to finish. She paused, her lips curving into the faintest smile. Closing the journal, she whispered softly to herself, "Let's see where this goes." Across town, Ethan sat by the window of his studio apartment, his camera resting on the table beside him. He had uploaded the photographs from the evening onto his laptop, each frame glowing with silver light. But one image held him still, the one of Amelia, standing by the railing, the moon shimmering behind her. He hadn't captured her face fully, just her silhouette, but the photograph radiated a quiet magic that made him catch his breath. He leaned back in his chair, staring out at the rooftops bathed in moonlight. It had been years since he felt this kind of peace, this kind of anticipation. For so long, his photographs had been his way of searching, of trying to capture something he couldn't name. And yet tonight, in the space of a few words and shared silences, he felt as though he had finally found the beginning of that missing piece. The following morning, Rosewood woke gently. The town square stirred with the smell of fresh bread from the bakery, the chatter of neighbors greeting one another, and the sound of children's laughter spilling from the schoolyard. Amelia moved through her classroom with ease, her voice patient, her heart lighter than usual. She found herself smiling at small things, at the way sunlight streamed through the windows, at the sound of her students debating over a puzzle, at the simple beauty of being here, in this moment. During lunch, she glanced at the clock more times than she cared to admit. The thought of coffee at the cafe with Ethan made her pulse quicken, though she tried to steady herself. It was just coffee, she told herself. But even she couldn't ignore the quiet excitement blooming in her chest. Meanwhile, Ethan wandered through the town with his camera, reacquainting himself with places he had once known by heart. He photographed the crooked sign outside the bookshop, the ivy crawling up the old stone bridge, and the lanterns being prepared for the upcoming festival. Each picture felt like a piece of home rediscovered. But beneath all of it, his thoughts circled back to Amelia, the way her eyes reflected curiosity, the softness in her laughter, the quiet strength in the way she carried herself. By the time the afternoon sun dipped lower, painting the sky in hues of amber and rose, Amelia found herself standing outside the cafe. The familiar bell above the door chimed as she stepped inside, the warm aroma of roasted coffee beans wrapping around her like a comforting embrace. She spotted Ethan at a corner table by the window, camera on the seat beside him, a notebook open before him. Their eyes met instantly, and both smiled without needing words. Amelia walked over, her heart steady yet alive with an undercurrent of something new. "You're early," Ethan said softly as she sat down. "So are you," she replied, a playful spark in her eyes. The waiter arrived with menus, but neither seemed in a rush to order. Their conversation picked up as if it had never paused, from stories of childhood memories in Rosewood to dreams they still carried quietly. Ethan spoke of places he had traveled, mountains that kissed the clouds, deserts that stretched endlessly, oceans that roared with untamed beauty. Amelia listened intently, her imagination weaving pictures of each word, and then she shared her own dreams, not of faraway lands, but of writing, of stories she longed to finish. She confessed how often she doubted herself, how her journal was filled with beginnings that never found their endings. Ethan leaned forward, his eyes steady. Maybe the endings aren't missing. Maybe they're just waiting for the right moment, or the right person to inspire them. Her breath caught at the sincerity in his tone. She looked down at her hands, tracing the edge of her cup, but couldn't stop the smile tugging at her lips. The cafe around them hummed with quiet life, but inside their little corner, time seemed to slow. It wasn't just conversation. It was the weaving of two stories, threads intertwining without force, without pretense. When they finally stepped out into the evening, the sky was deepening into twilight. The first stars appeared, winking above, as though blessing the quiet bond forming between them. They walked side by side, their steps unhurried, their hearts open to the gentle rhythm of discovery. At the edge of the square, where their paths would again diverge, Amelia paused. She looked up at the moon just beginning to rise and then back at Ethan. "Do you ever think," she asked softly, "that some meetings are written in the sky before they happen?" Ethan's gaze held hers, unwavering. "After last night, I don't just think it, I believe it." And with that, the night folded around them once more, carrying the whispers of a story just beginning, a love that would bloom slowly but deeply under the watchful glow of the moonlit sky. Chapter 2. The days in Rosewood had a way of moving gently, as if time itself chose to walk rather than run. For Amelia, the rhythm of her life had always been familiar. Mornings filled with the chatter of children in her classroom, afternoons spent preparing lessons, and evenings often quiet, accompanied by her journal or a cup of tea. But ever since that night by the lake, her routine felt different. It wasn't that her days had changed drastically. It was that she carried within her a quiet anticipation, like music playing faintly in the background of her thoughts. That morning, she found herself humming as she wrote a new story on the classroom board. Her students noticed, of course, their young eyes sharper than they often let on. "Miss Hart?" One of the girls piped up with a grin. "Why are you smiling so much today?" Amelia felt a blush rise, but quickly masked it with a playful shake of her head. Maybe because I have the best class in Rosewood, she teased, earning a chorus of giggles. But deep down, she knew her students were right. Something inside her had shifted. She carried the memory of Ethan's words, the sincerity of his gaze, and the calm assurance that their meeting hadn't been ordinary. Across town, Ethan rose early, the golden light of morning spilling across his studio apartment. He brewed coffee and stood by the window, camera slung around his neck out of habit. Yet instead of wandering aimlessly for subjects, he found his thoughts circling back to the cafe the day before, to the warmth of Amelia's presence and the way she listened, not just with her ears, but with her whole self. He glanced at the photograph of her silhouette he had printed the night before. It leaned against the wall near his desk, and though it was only an outline framed by moonlight, it stirred something within him that words struggled to capture. He wanted to see her again, not just in passing or through the lens of a camera, but truly, without the interruption of time or distance. That afternoon, after her classes ended, Amelia lingered in the school library, a stack of books piled high on her desk. She had promised herself she would spend the evening planning for next week's lessons, but her attention drifted toward the window, where sunlight filtered through, dappling the wooden floor. She thought of the Lantern Festival that would take place in 2 weeks, a tradition in Rosewood where families and friends gathered by the lake, releasing lanterns into the night sky as wishes floated with them. She hadn't missed one in years, but for the first time she found herself imagining what it might feel like to share that moment with Ethan. As if the thought had summoned him, her phone buzzed gently against the desk. It was a message. She unlocked it to see his name flashing across the screen. "Are you free this evening? I found a place I think you'd love. It's a surprise." Her heart skipped lightly as she typed back, "I think I can make time for a surprise." Later that evening, they met by the town square. The air was still warm from the day, but hints of autumn drifted in with the breeze. Ethan stood waiting near the fountain, camera slung at his side, his expression lighting up when he spotted her approaching. "You didn't tell me where we're going," Amelia said, adjusting the strap of her bag with a curious smile. "That's the point of a surprise," Ethan teased gently. "Trust me?" She hesitated only for a second before nodding. "I do." They walked together through winding streets lined with trees that whispered softly overhead. The path grew, quieter as they left the square behind, the cobblestones giving way to dirt trails that stretched toward the edge of Rosewood's forest. Amelia glanced at him, her curiosity heightening. "Are you taking me into the woods?" she asked, half teasing, half intrigued. "Not too far," he reassured. "There's a clearing ahead. I used to come here when I was younger. It's the best place to watch the stars. Hardly anyone knows about it." When they finally reached the clearing, Amelia stopped in awe. Before them stretched a meadow blanketed with wildflowers, their colors muted by the fading light but still glowing faintly, as if kissed by the dusk. Above, the first stars had begun to emerge, scattered like jewels against the deepening sky. "It's beautiful," she breathed. Ethan watched her face more than the meadow. "I knew you'd like it." They spread out a blanket he had tucked under his arm, settling on the grass as the night unfolded around them. Amelia leaned back, gazing upward, her heart both calm and alive. "I don't think I've ever seen the stars this clearly," she whispered. "That's because you're looking from the right place," Ethan said softly. "Sometimes all it takes is stepping away from where you've always been." They fell into easy conversation, weaving stories about constellations, sharing fragments of dreams, and laughing at the simple wonder of it all. Amelia told him about the stories her grandmother used to tell her, tales of the moon as a guardian of love, watching over those who dared to open their hearts. Ethan listened, captivated, his eyes reflecting the starlight. At one point, silence stretched between them, but it wasn't empty. Amelia turned her head, finding him already looking at her. For a long moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. There was no rush, no need for words. Just the quiet realization that something delicate yet powerful was unfolding between them. Something that felt as natural as the stars appearing one by one in the sky. Finally, Amelia whispered, "Thank you for bringing me here." Ethan's voice was low, steady. "Thank you for being here." And as the night deepened, they sat together under the endless canopy of stars, unaware that Rosewood itself seemed to be smiling, holding their story in its gentle embrace. The meadow glowed softly under the starlight, the quiet hum of crickets weaving a lullaby around Amelia and Ethan. The night carried with it the kind of stillness that made the air feel sacred, as though even the world had paused to listen. Amelia leaned back on her elbows, her gaze drifting across the velvet sky. "You know," she murmured, "I've read so many stories where love begins under the stars. I always thought it was too perfect to be real, something made for books. But now, sitting here, I understand why people write about it." Ethan's lips curved into a faint smile. "Maybe that's because the stars remind us how small we are, but also how infinite possibilities can be." Amelia turned her head toward him, her eyes catching the reflection of the sky in his. For a moment, she forgot the distance between them, forgot that only a few nights ago they had been strangers. Her heart told her that somehow she had known him much longer, that his presence was not new, but remembered. "Do you ever wonder," she asked softly, "if people are meant to find each other? That maybe some connections are written before we even realize it?" Ethan didn't look away. "I don't just wonder, I believe it, especially tonight." The words lingered between them, heavier than the air, yet lighter than the breeze. Amelia felt her cheeks warm, but she didn't break the gaze. She allowed the truth of it to sink in, to carve itself gently into her heart. After a while, Ethan shifted, pulling his camera closer. "Can I take another picture?" "Of the stars?" Amelia teased, though her voice carried curiosity. "Of you," he said quietly. Her breath caught. She hesitated, then gave the smallest nod. "All right, but no promises I'll look natural." "You don't have to," he assured. "Just be." She turned her eyes back toward the sky, letting her hair fall loosely around her shoulders. Ethan lifted the camera, his finger resting lightly on the shutter. Through the lens, he saw not just a woman framed by starlight, but a soul unfolding quietly, bravely, like a flower blooming under the moon. He pressed the button, the soft click echoing faintly in the meadow. When he lowered the camera, Amelia turned back to him, her eyes searching. "Do you think photography captures truth, or just a version of it?" He thought for a moment. "I think it captures what we choose to see. Sometimes it's truth, sometimes it's hope. Sometimes it's the way we wish things could be. But tonight, it's truth." Her chest tightened in a way both terrifying and comforting. She hugged her knees lightly, feeling the grass cool beneath her fingertips. The evening drifted into deeper hours. They spoke of childhood memories, Amelia recalling summers filled with library books and afternoons baking with her mother. Ethan sharing stories of fishing trips with his father, and the way he had always looked for beauty in the ordinary. Their voices carried laughter, sometimes quiet, sometimes full, until the meadow seemed alive with it. At one point, Amelia grew quiet, her gaze falling to the wildflowers around them. "There's something I haven't told many people," she said softly, almost as though confessing to the night. "I've always wanted to publish a book, not just write stories for myself, but share them. But I never finish them. I keep convincing myself no one would care to read them." Ethan leaned closer, his voice steady and sure. "I would. I think the world needs more of what you see, more of what you write." Her throat tightened, emotion catching her off guard. She looked at him, her eyes shimmering. "You say that so easily, like it's simple." "Because it is," he replied gently. "Sometimes the hardest things are only waiting for someone else to remind us they matter." For a moment, Amelia couldn't speak. She swallowed the lump in her throat and whispered, "Thank you." The meadow fell into silence again, but this time it was filled with something deeper. Trust, unspoken but undeniable. The stars above glittered brighter, as though echoing the bond forming quietly between them. Eventually, Ethan glanced at his watch, though his heart resisted the reminder. "It's getting late. We should probably head back." Amelia nodded, though she too felt reluctant. Together they folded the blanket and began the walk back through the forest path. The trees whispered overhead, the leaves rustling with secrets only they seemed to know. As they neared the edge of town, the lights of Rosewood flickered into view, warm and familiar. They paused at the point where their paths would part, the same unspoken moment they had shared before. "I'm glad you trusted me with the surprise," Ethan said softly. "I'm glad too," Amelia replied. Her smile carried both gratitude and something unspoken, a hope that this wasn't just another fleeting evening, but the start of something lasting. They lingered a little longer, both unwilling to let go. Finally, Amelia stepped back, her voice barely above a whisper. "Good night, Ethan." "Good night, Amelia," he answered, his tone carrying more meaning than the words alone. She walked toward her apartment, her steps light, her heart heavy with a sweetness she had never known before. Ethan stood watching until she disappeared from view, then turned toward his own path, the meadow's memory still alive in his chest. Neither of them knew what tomorrow would bring, but under the endless sky, both carried the certainty that something rare and fragile had begun, and neither wanted to let it slip away. The week slipped away like petals drifting on a quiet stream. Each day, Amelia and Ethan found themselves circling back to each other, their meetings never truly planned, yet never truly accidental. There was a rhythm forming between them, unspoken, yet undeniable, like the tide that faithfully kissed the shore. On Friday evening, the town square of Rosewood came alive with the weekly lantern gathering, an old tradition that carried stories of hope into the night sky. Families gathered, couples held hands, children ran about with glowing sticks, and the air shimmered with laughter and soft music from a violinist who stood beneath the elm tree at the heart of the square. Amelia had almost forgotten how magical this tradition felt. She arrived with a small lantern in hand, the kind her grandmother had taught her to make when she was younger. Its paper was delicately painted with tiny moonflowers, each brush stroke carrying a piece of her heart. She scanned the crowd, her pulse quickening at the thought of seeing him again. And there he was, standing a little apart from the bustle, his lantern glowing with warm amber light. Ethan spotted her, his face softening with that quiet smile that seemed to reach straight into her chest. "You came," he said as she approached, his voice barely louder than the surrounding music. "I wouldn't miss it," Amelia replied, lifting her lantern slightly, "though it's been years since I last joined." He tilted his head thoughtfully. "Then tonight will feel like a rediscovery." They found a space at the edge of the crowd where the soft hum of chatter blended into the night. Around them, people began to light their lanterns, the warm glow spreading like fireflies taking flight. Amelia held hers carefully, the flame flickering to life within its paper walls. She looked at Ethan, who was doing the same. "Do you make a wish before letting it go?" Ethan asked gently. Amelia nodded. Always. It's what my grandmother used to tell me. She said the lantern carries your hope to the stars. He considered her words, the glow of his lantern illuminating the thoughtful lines of his face. And what hope will yours carry tonight? She hesitated, her heart thudding. To speak it aloud felt both daring and vulnerable. That I find what I've been missing, she whispered almost to herself. Ethan's gaze lingered on her, deep and steady. Then perhaps tonight the stars will listen. A hush swept over the crowd as the signal was given. One by one, lanterns began to rise, floating upward in slow, graceful arcs. The sky transformed into a river of light, glowing trails drifting higher and higher until they merged with the stars. Amelia let go of her lantern, watching it rise with a silent prayer. Ethan released his at the same moment, their lanterns drifting close together as if bound by invisible threads. For a few breaths, neither of them spoke. The sight was too enchanting, too sacred to disturb with words. The lanterns shimmered against the night, and Amelia felt an ache in her chest that was both beautiful and terrifying. She turned slightly, finding Ethan watching the lanterns with quiet reverence. "It's beautiful," she murmured. "It is," he said softly, though she wasn't entirely sure he was talking about the sky. The music swelled in the square, couples beginning to sway together beneath the elm tree. Amelia felt her cheeks warm as Ethan glanced toward her, the hint of a question in his eyes. "Do you want to?" Her breath caught. She had not danced in years, and certainly not in the town square where neighbors could see. But something in Ethan's gaze, patient, kind, unhurried, made her nod. He extended his hand. She placed hers in his, and the world narrowed to the simple rhythm of steps and the quiet rustle of movement. They moved slowly, finding a rhythm not in perfection, but in presence. Amelia could feel the warmth of his hand at her back, steady and grounding, while the other held her gently, as if she were something precious. The music wrapped around them like silk. The laughter of children, the glow of lanterns still drifting into the heavens, the murmur of voices, all faded until there was only this moment. Only him. She caught herself meeting his eyes, and for a heartbeat, time seemed to still. When the song came to a close, they lingered for just a moment longer before reluctantly stepping apart. The lanterns had become tiny dots in the distance, merging with the stars. Amelia felt a quiet longing inside her, the kind that whispered of something only just beginning. Ethan cleared his throat softly. "Would you like to walk for a while? Away from the crowd?" She nodded, and together they drifted from the square toward the quieter streets of Rosewood. The night air was cool, carrying with it the faint scent of jasmine from the gardens they passed. Their steps were unhurried, their silence comfortable. Eventually, They found themselves by the old stone bridge that arched over the narrow river at the edge of town. The moon reflected on the rippling water, casting silver trails across the surface. Amelia leaned against the railing, her hair stirred gently by the breeze. Ethan stood beside her, close enough that she could feel the quiet strength of his presence. "It's strange," Amelia said softly, her gaze on the water. "Coming back here, I thought it would feel like stepping into the past. But with you it feels new, different." Ethan's voice was quiet, almost thoughtful. "Sometimes the right person changes the way we see everything." Her heart trembled at his words. She wanted to ask what he saw when he looked at her, but the question felt too heavy to give voice to. Instead, she let the silence stretch between them, filled only by the sound of the river and the soft rustling of trees. The moonlight bathed them in silver, the night wrapping them in its gentle embrace. And though neither spoke the words aloud, both Amelia and Ethan felt it, the whisper of something fragile yet powerful taking root, a connection as delicate and luminous as the lanterns that now floated far beyond their sight.